Hello and welcome to episode 12 of Wizard Weekly, where we bring you news and humor from around the spiral. This week, KingsIsle introduced a new pet to the game, the Evil Sandman. This little fella has a pedigree of 59 and has a vast armada of may-cast spells it can learn, including Sprightly, Hex, Disarm, and Power Play. This evil little dude and all his wonderful talents are going to cost you 2,000 crowns in the crown shop. If you live in Canada and you're a little short for crowns, fear not. Sometime this fall, stores across Canada will begin to carry the Wizard 101 prepaid cards. As of right now, there's no set date and nobody knows whether this will extend to the $40 cards or just the $10 and $20 ones. Things in the comments must have gotten pretty hairy because Mr. Lincoln posted on the official Wizard 101 site regarding the improper usage of open and text chat. He would like to remind us all that we have been given these as a privilege and asks that we remain respectful to our fellow Ravenwood students. This week in the Power Pip, Celestial Moon went up against Eric G1200 in the Wizard Central 200th Tournament first qualifier, and Eric took home the win. However, Celestial Moon is still in the game, battling others for the third place slot. We're eagerly awaiting the epic battle between Noob and the only one, 522, in the second qualifier to see who goes on to the last rounds. In other PvP news, the ladies are getting their groove on in the Queen of the Arena level 50 plus tournament, and though it's just gotten started, we hope to bring you some news from that as well. This week in Better Homes and Gardens, we'll be touring the house of Andrea Pixiepant. Her Marlibonian manor is right down the road from an enchanted park where trees can pick their favorite seasons, with at least one representing each. Just across the street is a small outdoor museum that changes themes every so often. We got to see her Crocotopian display, which she's enhanced using subtle floating tricks. Can you spot them? Just outside her home is an enormous fountain that she's added to give her bright little apartment a distinguished look. Just inside, we're greeted by her dormouse, Mr. Blue, who will gladly do a little song and dance for you as you enter her small lounge and dining area, which has a root beer bar in the recess under the stairs, manned by her two piggle bartenders. On your way to the stairs, there's a small shrine to her beloved derby pet, whom she still mourns the loss of. It's hard to grow plants in the city, though Andrea has triumphed, repurposing her fire escape to house her dandelions and their companion, Prince Charlie. Talk about pampered pets, they even have their own toys and scratching post. Inside Andrea's bedroom is her small corner where she performs psychic divinations for Scotland Yard. Her efforts helping to bring many criminals, including Meowie Artie and Jax the Scratcher, to justice. Her pet leprechaun Lucky stands guard over her treasures, or at least we think he does. After a long day of divination, she can head to Dreamland knowing she's well looked after by her pet Jade Oni, who guards her dreams and keeps the nightmares away. Not exactly my choice for a teddy bear, but if it works for her, fantastic. Tucked in her crafting corner is her live-in carpenter, who is capable of fixing everything and anything with his magical hammer, which is enchanted to be silent to avoid those pesky noise violations. Andrea's house isn't very large, but it is a well-cared-for, loved, and lived-in environment that she's used subtle floating techniques to give her own feel. Every nook and cranny has a small story to it, which just makes you want to come back to discover more and more about it, and that is incredibly cool. And that brings us straight to Letters from the Spiral, which will kick off with a glitching question from FC4, who asks us, do you think KingsIsle would consider reworking housing so that many housing glitches are unnecessary? A long time ago, I think either Professor Faume or Professor Greyrose mentioned that they were quote-unquote fiddling with the idea of making advanced furniture options that would allow you to slide your items around on a single furniture node instead of having to float it left, right, or forwards or backwards. and I think they called it nudging. I'm sorry I can't seem to find the post, it was a few years ago, and I don't know whatever happened with their quote-unquote fiddlings, but it just goes to show you that, even if it is buried underneath the massive mountain of their other projects, it is, or was at one point, on the metaphorical table. Whether or not they'll ever get around to implementing it, I don't know. Since it was a few years ago, I doubt it, but they have at least thought about it. Floating would be harder to pull off just because having a whole bunch of furniture nodes up in the air would be frustrating to a fault and rather redundant. And there are some other glitches that really just, I don't know, they would make more problems than they solved, I think. But I don't think it's too far-fetched to believe we will see some sort of furniture tweak somewhere in the future. Danbo is losing sleep over his pet collection because when he wrote in he asked, "Do you think KingsIsle will ever release the sheep pet?" If this is your first time hearing about the sheep pet, don't pull your farming gear on just yet, because the sheep pet is not available in-game. It is awarded by KingsIsle to outstanding members of the community, to people who have gone way out of their way to contribute to Wizard 101 or the wizarding community in some monumental way. There's only a select few wizards out there that have this pet, only 5 or 6 really come to mind, and all of them have done something pretty amazing to have earned them. Both Jester and Olivia, the hosters and maintainers of the Wizard 101 Central, have sheep pets because they've done such a wonderful job with Wizard 101 Central forums. There's a ton of information there, and they're providing it to the wizarding community for free. This super exclusive pet is basically KingsIsle's way of saying thank you so much for being so awesome, and releasing that to the public would just ruin that uniqueness. So no, KingsIsle will never release the sheep pet to the public. Discom Kid is thinking about flocking together with some like-minded wizards because he asks us, "Do you think KingsIsle will ever make guilds?" As fun as guilds sound, I don't think we'll ever see them in Wizard 101. KingsIsle's created a game with no factions to allow everyone to play together and keep any sort of unnecessary friction out of the game. Guilds wouldn't necessarily cause friction so much as the people within them would. Someone would get snooty and say, "Oh yeah, well my guild is better," and all of a sudden it would be a competition to see who could get their nose highest in the air or who could harumph the loudest, and that's not really something that Wizard 101 needs. On top of that, they'd be kind of redundant. In other MMOs, guilds are necessary because their endgame content requires anywhere from 10 to 40 people who know what they're doing, who have worked together before, to get through it. Because Wizard 101 is absent of such crazy shenanigans, there's really no need for guilds. Nothing for guilds to do, and after a short while they'd get incredibly boring. Sure, Wizard 101 could create content to challenge these guilds, but that would require a total overhaul of their dungeon system, and it's an extraordinary amount of work. In the end, it would be unfair to wizards who aren't in these guilds because they wouldn't be able to experience this awesome new content, and I can see guilds being very biased against menu chatters especially, which is also unfair, and it's a source of more conflict that is just not what Wizard 101 is about. Our last question of this week comes from Stevie, who wonders, "Do you think KingsIsle will continue with their weekly updates?" KingsIsle's been doing something recently that they should have been doing for a long time, and that is directly engaging their audience, involving them in the creation process. Whether they didn't have the time or the means to do it earlier, I don't know, but I can't tell you how glad I am that they finally started pushing Feedback Friday and their weekly updates. The feedback they've gotten has been massive and pretty positive, and I think they'd be super smart to continue on this track. As aggravating as wading through all our mixed feedback is, they can use that to make the game more appealing, and they know this, which is even better. So yeah, I think KingsIsle will be continuing on their Feedback Variety and weekly updates. Alrighty, that's it for this week's Wizard Weekly, folks. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to join us next week for more news and humor from around the spiral. Happy weekend, everybody! This week, KingsIsle 0 in the Wizard Central 200th tournament display, which she's enhanced using float ago. I don't know what happened there.